Hello, everybody. Welcome to Scalehouse Voices featuring Samantha Wall and Frank Janzen. We're so excited to have you here with us to kick off our third Scalehouse Voices event of 2021. My name is Lana Bano, and on behalf of Scalehouse, we're so grateful you're here. Thank you for taking the time to support art communities. As part of our continued learning and land acknowledgements, Scalehouse would like to acknowledge that we are currently on stolen land. Those of us in Central Oregon live and work in the traditional homelands of the Confederation of Warm Springs, Wasco, and Paiute Native American tribes. It is essential we recognize that the Warm Springs, Wasco, and Paiute peoples signed treaties under great duress and grave threat. We are thus responsible for the past and current violence that Indigenous people face. As an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and as a way of honoring the Indigenous people who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial, we will be forwarding proceeds from tonight's talk and from sales of the exhibition to the Warm Springs Community Action Team to support art initiatives in Warm Springs. Before we introduce our speakers tonight, we want to make note that there will be a Q&A following the presentation. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, so please submit your questions and we will have time at the end to discuss. Andrew Lorish will be moderating the Q&A, so thank you, Andrew. Our current exhibit at Scalehouse Gallery features Crow Shadow Institute of the Arts, and we are lucky enough to have former printmaster Frank Janzen and featured artist Samantha Wall with us today. It is my pleasure to introduce them both. Frank Janzen was the first full-time resident master printer at Crow Shadow starting back in 2001. While at Crow Shadow, he collaborated with artists around the world, helping them to realize their vision in the form of either printed lithograph, monoprints, or monotypes. At the same time, he helped to set up and organize a world-class print studio, all while maintaining his own art practice in prints and painting, holding numerous solo and group exhibitions around Eastern Washington and Oregon. After 16 years at Crow Shadow, he retired at the end of 2017 and maintains an active studio practice. He will be joined in conversation by Samantha Wall, a current Crow Shadow featured artist. Samantha, originally from Seoul, South Korea, is an artist working in Portland, Oregon. Samantha immigrated to the United States as a child and comes from a multiracial background. Operating from within this framework, her drawings embody the experience of navigating transcultural identity. Her projects have been exhibited at the Seoul Art Center, Q Out Foundation in New York, the Portland Art Museum, along with exhibition spaces in New Orleans, Los Angeles, and Frankfurt. Samantha is also the recipient of numerous grants and awards, such as the MFA grant from the Joan Mitchell Foundation, just to name one. Together, Samantha and Frank will be discussing printmaking, the creative process, and their time at Crow Shadow Institute of the Arts. The two artists work closely together while developing Samantha Wall's prints that are displayed in the Scalehouse Gallery today. Without further delay, I'm happy to present Samantha Wall and Frank Janzen.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here today. And it was a pleasure to serve as Crow Shadow's first full-time resident master printer. Crow Shadow was founded in 1992 by James Lavador and friends. And it's located in the basement of the Mission Schoolhouse on the Umatilla Indian Reservation near Pendleton, Oregon. It needed extensive renovation, so they managed to get some major funding to do that. Crow Shadow's mission is to provide a creative conduit for educational, social, and economic opportunities for Native Americans through artistic development. James got the idea of printmaking as being a prime source or prime revenue source for Crow Shadow by doing a residency at Rutgers Innovative Print and Paper, working with a Tamarind master printer, Eileen Fody. He loved the idea of prints, even though he was a painter and doesn't do printmaking himself, but works with collaborative printmakers. So the big thing is why printmaking? Why choose printmaking? my analogy always is that if you create one painting, you have a potential of one client. If you do a limited edition of say 15 or 20 fine art hand pulled prints, you have a potential of 15 clients, potential, at a lower price. So it gets to, the idea was that printmaking was always a very democratic medium and that it could be spread farther, faster than any other method. So what is lithography? What is the lithography all about? Well, I could spend 4 hours here talking about it, but I won't. Lithography was invented by Alois Sennefelder in 1796 in Germany. He was a playwright who wanted to be able to disseminate his plays faster. He happened to be living right next door to Sonelphen quarries, which quarried the finest limestone in the world, and made it work. The whole premise of lithography is that grease and water don't mix. So he tinkered around and he found a way of drawing on the surface of the stone with a greasy substance and using chemicals to make the drawn areas attract grease or ink and the negative areas attract water. That is the whole premise of it. To do lithography traditionally on stone or nowadays special aluminum plates, it takes 21 steps. And from drawing to processing to actually printing to be able to pull a proof, you're looking at 3 to 4 hours. There are newer methods nowadays, and this is what we'll show in Samantha's slides, where we work with what we call positive working photoplates. And these are aluminum plates that we covered with a photosensitive emulsion, but we'll explain that more later. I've also been asked to explain the difference between monotypes and monoprints. This is something that's very, very confusing to museums, galleries, people in general. A monotype is where you would take a flat surface or a matrix, such as plexiglass, roll on ink or brush on ink or paint on ink or do whatever you like, and then run it to the press. You manipulate it, run it to the press, and you get this monotype. However, a lot of people have a misconception that in monotypes, you only go through the press once. That is totally untrue. You can go through 27 times. You can keep adding ink. You can just play with it. And it still becomes a monotype because there is not one element that is reproducible. So if you look at this, if you look at when Lana's on the screen, there's a Rick Bartow behind her. That is a monoprint simply because there is one element that is reproducible, and that is a lithograph. So what we do very briefly, Rick would draw on the Mylar. We're using a Xerox toner powder and alcohol, very quickly draw his bird. We would set it. We would expose it onto a positive working photoplate. So that's now our matrix for our lithograph. And then I would take the Mylar and reverse it on the back of a piece of plexiglass. So then Rick could go in there, I could ink up, and he could start taking away and manipulating and doing everything like that. So we would take one day to print those background colors. They essentially are monotypes. But the next day we come back in and ink up the lithographic plate. And in this case, he just wanted black. And we would print that on top of all these ones that we produced the day before. This now becomes a monoprint simply because that element is fixed in one position. Now we could use lino cuts, we could use wood cuts. As long as they were all in the same position, then they become a monoprint. Now the last time I worked with Rick in 2013, he only comes for a week, and we produced 75 monoprints in 4.5 days, which was astounding. So it's a very fast way of working, and he would draw into it and stuff like that. So I hope that helps explain the difference to somewhat. Now, in my time at Crow Shadow, I worked with at least 60 plus artists. I don't know, lost count. And it's been an absolute honor. It's been great. Now, the artist residencies usually last for 2 weeks. The artist comes and stays. It's like I'm still there. Well, we had a small bedroom off the studio where they would stay. And whenever they wanted to work in the morning, that's fine. That's when we'd start. Now, the big thing is that I would, you know, as a collaborative printer, we've never met the artist. So you're coming new, meeting somebody new, somebody with a incredible background of making art, and you've got to sort of work with them and make them feel comfortable in your space. And you do also do a lot of research about the artist's style, preferred drawing or painting methods, etc. So I researched Samantha and found out that she liked drawing with ink on paper. So cue Samantha, come on board. There you are. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. Just learning more about the history of printmaking.
That was very brief, I'll tell you.
Yes, consolidated. I am going to share my screen. I have some images and a few videos. Let's see. Okay, so I was going to briefly just talk about my work before we start talking about the 2 weeks I was there in 2016, just to provide a little bit of context. So around that time, I was working in portraiture. I was making portraits of multiracial and multi-ethnic women that I met in the Pacific Northwest and in New Orleans, where I spent a month as an artist in residence in 2013. But then also in 2016, it was right before I went to Crow Shadow. And I found that I was really interested in trying to capture this quality, this very sort of nuance and very specific to that individual, this quality about them that, makes them, I guess, kind of identifiable to the people who know them best, something that I like to refer to as like the air of an individual. And but I also found that I really enjoy working in silhouettes or something between portrait and silhouette. And I feel like that's a much longer talk, so I won't go that into detail as to why. But right before going to Crow Shadow, I made ink on paper, sort of silhouette portraits like this. This is from 2016. And so I knew that while at Crow Shadow, I wanted to continue exploring silhouettes, the sort of, I don't know, I think that my attraction to it is because silhouettes feel kind of otherworldly. There's a sense of absence, but there's also something that's very recognizable within that space. And I wanted to try to find a way to fill it, like to communicate that, I don't know, that absence wasn't a void to me. Like there's something very vast about that space. And so that was my only imperative going in, is that the only preparation I did was taking some images of myself in silhouette to use as source material. And I often do that when I'm working in portraiture or, silhouette drawings. And that was the only thing that I did to prepare. Like I really wanted the 2 weeks there. I don't know, I guess I wanted to allow that collaborative process, between you and I to inform the work rather than bringing in too much of my own expectations, which is very unusual for me. Like like most artists work alone. I have a very solitary practice, and so it was a little bit challenging at first, but I felt really welcome, and I felt I don't know, you did so much to help kind of prepare me.
That's my job. Facilitator.
Yes, yeah, it was really welcoming and such a beautiful, like the landscape and the print studio is beautiful, and I was just really excited about the prospect of making prints. Like the last time I'd made lithographs was in college, and just for like a part of a semester. And so I didn't know too much going in. And in fact, I expected to work on stone instead of acetate. So that was a surprise, but a great surprise. Like it ended
It
up,
was a great surprise. It was wonderful. I think we should explain that I gave Samantha India ink, which is very dense, in which she diluted it into different shades of black, if you will. And this is Mylar strapped down onto a piece of board, and she would just start drawing. The reason we use India ink because it is very, very light fast. So I'm going to be exposing this onto a positive working photo plate. I don't want to burn out the very delicate areas and still maintain the blacks and still maintain the delicate areas. So it's a very careful balance to work this out, but she handled it pretty beautifully. So
yeah,
what can I say?
well, it did take some experimentation. I think I have a short video, yes,
Mhm.
of I think maybe the second day.
Oh, I can't remember. Days. Yeah.
Well, I know it wasn't the first day because I felt really overwhelmed.
Oh,
but
no. First day is introduction. There's nothing
yeah,
you can do about that. The other thing is that with this India ink and water, you have to wait for the water to dry.
yes,
And so there's a lot of waiting involved.
yes. And that's where the magic happened. Like
Right.
in the process of drawing, there was all of this, let's see, move through this a little faster. Beautiful reticulation
Got
that
it.
I was so surprised. I wasn't expecting this surface. And it changed everything for me. Oh my God.
Yeah, no, it's just so many hilarious. And the only one, it's interesting you had that image on the right. That was the only image that you actually had to modify somewhat, and it improved it 1000%
It did.
because when I did a test strip on, especially around the mouth area, and that I couldn't hold it. It just didn't work, and so you went back into it, and magic happened.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I
magic happened.
remember that. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I could layer
Oh yeah.
more ink on top. Yeah, that was a surprise. And I think, was this the very first one we completed?
I believe it was, yeah. So I did some test strips to see where all the gray areas, where all the shaded areas were and stuff like that. And now I'm setting the registration marks up for the plate. And then I'll expose this onto a positive working photo plate. This is our marketing director, Nika Blasser.
Yeah.
And we had a hijacker from her office to do this, and she loved it because she loves printmaking and she loves being an artist. So she's my press assistant. So she has to keep that plate just slightly down. So you apply a wet sponge first, and then very quickly and smoothly take off any excess water. And then that's where I come in and print this.
And this is on an aluminum plate, or
This is on it's an aluminum plate.
Okay.
It's yeah, we call it a positive working photo plate. It's something that was used in the commercial industry a lot. Nowadays, a lot of it's digital. They still, they'll still use this. But the thing, when I mentioned before with lithography, stone lithography, you're looking at 3 to 4 hours of processing before you actually pull a print. I can expose this, do a certain thing to it, go to the press, ink up, and print in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's the reason I kind of like photolithography. I love stone lithography, but there's a lot of grinding and for the next one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And we did have a number of stones, but not many that had this quality. And the thing is, I wouldn't have had 4 stones to do all of your 4 images.
Right.
So this was just a very fast, convenient way of working.
Right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember how quickly
Yeah.
we were able to produce these.
Yeah, if the plate is working well, like now, it's magic. It's very easy. So I have to go 4 times from the inking slab to the plate. That's the norm. That's what you try to do. You try to have control over your inking level. You have control over your pressure. That's about it. And after that, you don't have control. You just hope that it works.
Mhm.
You know, that's really what it is.
I think the next.
So this is what we call color trial proofing.
Oh,
So
this one?
no, it's okay. It's okay. You can carry on to the video. That's fine. So this whole process initially is just doing trial proofs, color trial proofs, etc.
And this one, Stephen, my husband, is your assistant for the day.
Yeah, I was teaching him the sponge. Did a
Mhm.
fantastic job. So that's a 21-pound roller that I have to pick up and roll across the plate. And you stay on it once, twice, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times, depending.
Yeah,
So
I
you do
think.
that for 8 hours a day, you get a good workout.
Oh, that.
So this is the first one in black.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that was in putting the slideshow together. I mean, I still have these proofs, but I forget that we tested these prints on white paper first, like black ink on white paper.
Well, because you drew on white paper, right? So we just thought, man, well, this would be a good way of testing and I'll see if it works, but I'll
Mhm.
let you explain.
Yeah, well, something that I think I discovered during my time there was that I wanted the prints to do something more than what my drawings do. You know, I wanted there to be sort of more evidence of printmaking. Um, and I loved this. Like the black ink on white, I thought, you know, like the delicacy of the marks. Um, it felt similar enough to my drawings that, you know, of course I loved it, but um, I felt like there was still an aspect of there was just still something that um I don't know, there was just still something that was missing. Like I could tell there was just something more that you know, I wanted to explore and I couldn't quite figure that out. And it was actually Stephen, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it wasn't like it was early on that
It was
he,
early on, and
yeah,
then I believe you decided to print silver background and black on the silver.
yes, yes.
And then the Stephen comes next after that.
Yes, yeah, and he inverted it, and I think also during maybe that very first day, you might have shown me some silver on black prints,
Possibly did, yeah. Yeah, we
and
did have
you
some.
know maybe that kind of like stuck, but
Okay.
I mean, I think I was so overwhelmed, like the process of it. I mean, I was discovering this whole other way of working. I was in a new space, you know, like I just got back from a different residency and we had like a lot of other things going on, so that I just didn't remember you showing me. And there was so much work in that space. So I think I just didn't remember it and he did. Oh, so this video I really love because you do this turn with the
Everybody likes the tamarind turn. They call it the tamarind turn because that's
oh,
where I've learned it.
oh. I think I have 3 videos of you doing this. It's ridiculous. So this is us looking at the black on silver and then the silver on black, and I think it was pretty obvious to
It
all of
was,
us.
I think you've got another slide, but it doesn't matter. But that's Carl Davis. He's their Crowshadow's executive director. And of course, Nika, who is the marketing director. And they have done a fabulous, fabulous job since their time there. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so these are color trial proofs. And we put them up. And I think, I'm not too sure whether the next slide is.
Oh,
Yeah,
I think
all three.
it's all,
Yeah.
yes.
So there's what we had to choose from. And it was pretty obvious
Yeah.
to everybody, because one of the things as a printmaker, whether I pull my own prints or somebody else's, you have, as a printmaker, you have control, like you say, inking level, pressure, and any other variables. You try to control those variables, but you don't have any control. You don't know what's going to happen until you start picking up that paper and pulling it up. And as soon as I pulled up that silver on black, I get this feeling right in my solar plexus. It's like, that one's hot. I just knew it. Didn't say much, but you had the same reaction, I think, because
Yes,
it was just, yeah,
it
it
was
was a given.
immediate. Yeah, yeah, I knew right away, like that was sort of the missing piece was there, and I think, let's
One
see.
thing we should point out too, that no, it doesn't really matter which ones, but we had to, we're not using black paper because black paper is too flat and too dull. So each piece, each 22 by 30 piece had to be hand printed in full black. In actual fact, I ink it up really richly, and then we run it through the etching press, and then we take, and there's so much ink on it, we have to strip it back with newsprint to take off any excess ink, and then let it sit, and that really gives that richness, and then you print the silver on top.
Yeah, yeah, there's seeing these in person, I mean, there's a almost the black is almost velvety. Like there's something,
Yes.
it's so rich and dense and deep. And then the silver on top of that, the iridescence. I mean, there's something like what I love so much about these, when we got them all completed was that they felt, like they feel almost like an X-ray or an MRI. There's
Yes.
something about
Yeah.
it that
Yeah,
communicates.
you're talking internal and external.
Yes,
It's really cool.
yes,
And
yeah,
I just love the delicate marks of the hair and stuff like that. I mean, they're so fine. And
yeah.
I was so pleased to hold them, to maintain them.
There's something very like there's this like electricity or something that runs through them.
Right.
And they do exactly, it was exactly what I was hoping for, that there are these silhouettes that are both this like there's an absence of, I mean, there's something recognizable, obviously, and within these there's various things that are recognizable. And then there are moments where they feel like they speak about an anatomy that
Yeah, the one on the right.
something,
The one on
right?
the right is just like, wow.
Yeah, it's
You talk about
it's
inside, outside.
yes, yes, yeah,
Phew.
yeah. And it just it does I felt like I finally there was a way for me to communicate this sort of like interior experience that I've been trying to I don't know, draw with ink on paper. And, like this did it in a way that I wasn't anticipating. And, I think that that's the power of working collaboratively, being open to working collaboratively
Right.
is the sort of expansion of one's practice. And, like that wouldn't have happened if I had gone to Crow Shadow, like very like adamant about what I was going to make or, over preparing, which I tend to do. Um, uh,
Yeah, and then see, well, the thing is, a lot of people don't realize how many different methods we can employ to achieve what the artist's got in mind. I'm going to recall a quick story when Truman Lowe he was one of the first artists I worked with. He was from Wisconsin, and he works exclusively. He's a sculptor. He was a sculptor primarily. Um, and I says, well, what do you want to do? And he says, well, you got a little Caran d'Ache crayon. I went, yeah. Okay. So he took a piece of paper, and I think it's still somewhere at Crochetto. The piece of paper is only about this big. And he just went like this, made these marks in different colors. That's what I want. I said, okay. So then I had to find a way of him to make that mark onto Mylar so I could expose it. And then we printed these things out of this one image. We printed so many different pieces of paper, and Japanese paper is very light, very ephemeral. And then he layered them, and you could see through them, and there were waterfalls, and there was like, go figure, out of these little marks, which was amazing. So yeah, the one on the right, oh, love it.
I know,
So
yeah.
what I should also mention is that these then become the approvals to print, or APTs. And they're signed on the back as the approvals to print with proper inking and drying times and time signed and dated by the artist. So these are the ones that I would, when I do the editioning, come as close as I physically can to these. Now, the other bonus as a printmaker, as the master printer, is that when I start editioning, I work towards what we call a bona terra, BAT, and that means good to pull. In other words, that one is going to be it's going to be as close as possible to the approval to print, but match the rest of the edition to that BAT. Now the BAT becomes my property, which is a nice bonus. Thank you very much. So yes, I do have a nice collection. So that's, and the press assistant also usually gets an approval, gets a printer's proof. Now I have to mention this, for the longest time, we couldn't afford press assistants, and trying to find volunteers is very difficult. So my wife Marie kindly learned how to sponge. And she was with me for most of the time and doing the editioning and doing whatever it took to make it all come to fruition. So it was great.
Mhm.
One more thing, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I think this is quite an honor, is that when we keep track of all the publication costs, it's all the material costs, the time involved, everything that's involved in creating these editions. What Nika did was put these onto the website, and they started selling so fast, it wasn't even funny. It was like, really? You have your collectors, and then, but the other people look, as I gotta have one, save one for me. Well, the edition isn't done yet. We'll wait. Okay, so what happens is that the publication costs are paid down as the prints are being purchased. And then once they're paid down, we share it 50-50 with the artist. Samantha's was the first one where when she came to sign the prints, we actually gave her a substantial check. That was the first time, and I felt so proud. It was so wonderful to having produced these, and then suddenly you get a reward. Loved it. It was great.
Yeah, it was quite a surprise.
It was right. It's like, whoa. So yeah, they're editions of 20, and they're well worth. They're wonderful.
I'm still blown away by them. I mean, and it's so strange because my time at Crow Shadow, I mean, that was 2016, and it was
I know.
5 years ago, but it feels almost like yesterday, because so much, I think because that time was so, I don't know, almost transformative, like I created work that that absolutely blew me away. Like I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting to discover a new way of handling ink. You introduced me to acetate, and I think Nika was the one that recommended Durlar. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think something that I wasn't anticipating was that you had to destroy the original drawings on acetate. I was so heartbroken. I was
A
so
lot of people hate that, and you destroy the plates.
yes,
Yeah.
because I had plans
limited.
for them. I was gonna hang them.
I mean, I would love them too. And no, I've had a bunch of artists want to keep the Mylars, etc. I said, no, you can't. There's just no way. That is tradition, and you cannot be. It got to a stage at Tamron, we were taught that even a newsprint that's pulled from a plate, just initially, they were torn up because people would take them and hang them up and save them. But that's the property of the artist, actually, and the studio. So yeah, very, very strict rules, unfortunately.
I know. I remember trying to convince you to to let me keep one. But it was great because it only inspired me to make more when I got, back to my own studio. And so that's exactly what I did. And for the first time, it let me make work, these like full body pieces. These pieces are about, I think they're like 7 feet long.
At
Um,
least.
and like I could make something in, I don't know, I think I probably made these between like 3 to 5 days. And some of the things that I didn't anticipate when I made these in my studio versus the pieces that I made at Crow Shadow was how the humidity and temperature affected the drying time of the pieces of the ink, so some of the ink would almost or the ink water solution would dry within minutes and create these sort of like milky surfaces. And other times when, like if it was raining, that dry time would be drawn out and the ink would start to like fracture. And And so I was getting a really wide range of marks, but nothing like the reticulation that was happening at Crow Shadow.
It
And
could be with the Duralar too, Samantha. It's a different surface,
right.
slightly different surface. There's a different thing, but
It,
maybe, sorry,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
no, that's fine.
Okay. Well, that's true. The Duralar that I was using, rather than being clear, it's coated on both sides. So
Right,
there's a little more tooth to it.
right.
And but at the same time, like that sort of semi-translucent surface, it almost feels like skin.
Mm,
And like the way that these pieces were hung, there was a little bit of space between them and the wall, and so they felt like they had depth to them.
yes.
In a small way, they mirrored some of what was happening in the prints, but the prints are just a whole other
Mm.
creature, and I could never remake anything like that in the studio. But
Do it
I would,
again?
well, I mean, I would love to, I would love to go and make more, but I would also, I don't know, I don't want to like reproduce them. I want
No,
to be,
no, you wouldn't. You'd have to do something totally different,
yeah,
but
yeah,
still in the same. I don't know. I mean,
I, right.
it's really hard to say.
It's true. And there's something very different that happens. Like when you're first discovering something, it just almost anything seems possible. And once you've been working with material for many years, you become familiar with it. And that like newness is lost, like for me, like I have a tendency to I don't know. I tend to overwork the surface of my drawings. Like I really have to fight that habit, or like compulsion. Um, and I also, because I usually just work with ink or graphite or charcoal, I build this really intimate relationship with my materials. So I get to know them, like
Sure.
um, I understand like what I mean, with ink and water, it's a little bit difficult to predict, but like I kind of know what to expect. And over the last 5 years, this technique, I've really come to understand how, even though it's unpredictable, I'm starting to like gain some understanding. So to return to using that material and making prints, I mean, they would be different just because I know what I'm doing now, I guess.
Right, right.
And this is
Those are absolutely amazing. I walked in that gallery and wow. And
I
it felt so good having being done just after the prints, and that these were, sort of a step up from the prints.
right,
I
right.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
I remember just returning my studio and I mean, and I know in part it's because I couldn't bring home those original drawings, and there was this like this drive to make more, but then also to like increase the scale, like I feel like that's something
uh,
um
yeah,
I just can't, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it is. Like there's something about using my entire body and like crawling over the surface of the Duralar, and it was so dynamic. And I don't, it just, all I remember is just like ink and water everywhere. Like it was amazing. It was, I had like I think I made 5 or 6 pieces, and I had each of the pieces laid out in my studio. At the time I had, this like really large, like 1,000 square foot space. So I could work that way. Um, and it was, yeah, it was an amazing experience. Like that month it was just so electric. The whole experience was so electric.
very cool, very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, like I'm still, there's pieces behind me um that are ink on Duralar. I think the gold piece is actually this calligraphic ink that has this there's this sort of liquid substrate, and then this like kind of denser material. And so that gold is it's not like a solid pigment. There's a lot of sort of gradation within it. So it also has a lot of depth, but it's much more solid. Like it doesn't have the same kind of quality as the India ink on Duralar, but it's a material that, like there are marks and techniques that I can't replicate on a watercolor paper or, any kind of
Right.
natural material. Like it's this synthetic paper that is able to, I don't know, it's that it's that the ink has to sort of sit on that surface and float, and like, there's a kind of organic movement that prevents me from, overworking and over like fussing with the surface. And
There's a tenuous quality of the actual physical qualities of the ink on something like a plastic. That's what Durlar is basically, in a sense,
sure,
right? It's
yeah,
not, it's not like the ink is being absorbed. It's got to hang on there,
right,
you
yeah,
know? So it's amazing.
it
Amazing
is.
work.
Yeah, and it's very unexpected. I mean, the material also takes graphite and charcoal.
Oh,
Um,
really? Okay.
yeah, yeah, I've been actually exploring that as well, like drawing on both sides of the surface, and so using ink on one side and then more
Oh,
traditional
lovely.
materials on the other. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of possibilities with this, and it's yeah, it just wouldn't have happened had it not been, you know, for you and Crow Shadow. Like it really was this moment. I mean, I think that really it's like what a collaboration should be. That
Oh, absolutely. It was wonderful.
yeah, yeah. I think that might be my last image.
It is.
Let's see.
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we're ready to answer some questions if there are any.
Yeah, we had a couple trickle in the Q&A section, and if you have anyone out there want to add to it, please do. Great talk. Thank you so much. That was amazing. One of the questions that I have is how did you, Samantha, find time going from a studio practice that's pretty dedicated and suddenly making it kind of in a more public sphere, making work in the arrangement of a print studio with marketing execs, people walking around, lots of activity. Was it a difficult switch to go from a studio to that environment?
Yes, yeah, it was, but also, I mean, there wasn't that much activity, and I I think that the way that I was working, that the ink on acetate, there isn't like there's a lot of edge control, like the way that I'm working. I mean, it feels like just manipulating a puddle, on the plastic. And so that was so, um, I don't know, like it's just such a different way of drawing than making portraits. Like when I'm making portraits, I have to be in this sort of like intense, vulnerable state to sort of be able to access that sort of, I don't know, the kind of impression, like when you meet somebody and they leave this sort of like affective residue, like there's something that's like there's just some quality that they leave and you hold on to. And so it's that I'm kind of mining when I'm making portraits. And so it's like a deeply, like internal process. Like I have to have this sort of like silent space. And my studio feels very much like this like sanctuary. Like I need a space where I can lock the door and know, that I can like shut out the rest of the world and like make these portraits. But while I was at Crow Shadow, I mean, I think that because it was such a new process and it was, like there was a lot of like experimentation, and like I said, a lot of it was just like kind of controlling that edge. I could sort of shut out everything else and focus on that. And it also didn't take me hours to make. Like I could make quite a few of them in a very short period of time and then go back in and rework them. So and if I made a mistake, I would just start over. And so it felt, I don't know, it just felt a little more relaxed, I think. Or at least I was a little more relaxed at Crow Shadow, and I didn't mind like
I would
having
I
other.
wouldn't, yeah, sorry, man. Sorry, Smith. I wouldn't mind adding too, when an artist works with us, that usually nobody else comes into the studio except me and the press assistant. So we don't have people walking through. And if somebody wanted to come through, I would ask the artist permission if they would mind. And most artists are very, yeah, come on in. They'll talk about their practice and stuff like that. But we try to restrict that. Even, even the executive director and the marketing director, they don't just walk through. They might come through to take photographs, but that's about it. So it's pretty much one-on-one.
Yeah, that leads me to the follow-up, Frank. The relationship between the artist and master printer, and kind of also taking on the role of a facilitator for a vision. The question is, where did you learn how to do that? How to separate your ego from that process and get involved?
Well, yeah, that's a good one. I'm Tamarind trained. You've heard of the Tamarind Institute in Albuquerque. I mean, they're very strict on that. But I've also, over the years, sort of love the psychology of dealing with people. So this is what it is. It's sort of a dance, and you got to get to know this person. You got to see where they're coming from. It helps if everybody has a sense of humor. I love that. That has to be, one of the big things, because if you don't have a sense of humor, it's like, it's hard work. It's hard slogging, But the majority of the artists, and I mean the absolute majority of the artists I work with, there was always this give and take. Once you became familiar with each other, their working habits, if they were working, concentrating, you walk away, you go do something else. You don't sit there and hover over them or anything like that. You very rarely put your input into it unless asked. Okay. Oh no, don't do that. Do this. And there are printmakers who will do that, and I'm going, no, that's not what you do. So if asked, what do you think? Do you think maybe what color? You might give, but it's not my preference. It's the artist. And the other thing I've learned too, never underestimate the artist. In other words, if they pick the ugliest color that you'd ever think of, I mean, ugly colors, you think that is awful. Zip, you don't say a thing, because it just might work, and usually does. Okay. And I know I worked for somebody a long time ago that she wouldn't even let the artist be there when she mixed the colors. That's an absolute no-no. I mean, the artist has to advise me how those colors, what color would you like here? Do you want this? Do you want that? And I control all of that, but they have the input. So yeah, it's interesting.
How has that process informed your own work, Frank?
Oh, but I learned just as much from the artists as they do from me. I look at something up, especially when it comes to problem solving. They'll say, well, can I do this? And I go, I don't know. I've never done it before, but let me do some research or let me figure it out. Usually the next day we come back and we can do that. Yeah, it's informed myself and my own work to some degree too. I don't know how, but it just does. I mean, it's a two-way street, really what it is. So, yeah.
Samantha, question, the big sale that was brought up, how did that change your trajectory, or if at all? Was it the printmaking and delving into that and the sort of economic underpinnings of multiples help you out in the last 5 years?
I mean, it has, yes. And also I like, as I said, like I briefly studied printmaking in college, and like really enjoyed it. And I think at that time, that's when I discovered that I'm really process oriented. When I was asked to be, resident crochetto, I was really excited about like grinding the stones. Like that was one of my, like favorite like parts of working.
Oh, we could have got you working.
I remember like that. I remember that sensation more than anything else. So I was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And so I was a little disappointed not to have the stones, but at the same time, the acetate, like that opened up this whole other world of making. And, I prefer that. But I mean, I think printmaking is something I definitely want to do again. But also I think that just like residencies, it's so difficult because I'm so particular about my space, and I finally feel like I have a studio that's just, it's like set up exactly how I wanted. It's really difficult to leave. But residencies just offer this opportunity to like leave your comfort zone, right? And you know, like and hopefully like expand your practice by doing that. And so I have to remind myself that that's important, you know, from time to time. Um, and not just like sequester myself in, you know, my lovely studio. And yeah.
The trauma of disappointment seeing the tamarind turn, you know, I never figured it out. And oh, now it's just showing off.
After you've been rolling so many times, I mean, you can't, you know, a small roller you can just pick up and turn it around, but even that's like, even with the smallest roller, I'll do that because you're in the flow, you're going back and forth, you're twisting the roller each time, and then you know you got to even that ink out. You just hit it like this, and I've had young students do it, and they are just like blown away. I can do this. Yeah, it's basically easy. It's just a little trick. It impresses a big audience. I've had people of 44 people and they're doing a demonstration and I do this. They go, oh, it's just a trick.
Craig, we're curious about the work that you have behind you.
Yeah. Well, this is work. The thing is, I have to let people know that a lot of master printers don't do their own work, which I find like hard, but they go, I put a hard day in work. I don't feel like doing my own work now. I don't feel like doing additions or anything like that. So there was a period of time where I wasn't doing much. And then I did have a small studio where we lived. And then of course I had the complete Crochetto studio, right? You know, you had 4 presses and what do you just play? I mean, just have fun. So about 2013, I work in mono print, not monotypes, not monoprints, monotypes, because I do a lot of additioning. Why should I make additions for myself and they sit under the bed? There's no point. So I like doing monotypes because you end up getting a series. So in about 2013, I started applying actual smoke to paper. And that's using matches, igniting matches, holding the paper up. There we are. I got a delay here. It's really weird. Holding paper up like this and lighting a match from a candle and letting the smoke. In the first milliseconds, that smoke hits that paper and stays there. Then I set that in with using just a transparent base. And then I create the image around it. So after seeing all the smoke, and I don't know if you remember all the wildfires we had down there too, that has sort of played into my mind. But the biggest thing was I'm from the West Coast. I'm from Vancouver Island. We have mountains, we have trees, we have all this stuff. So, but in my commute to work at Crochetto, it was about 24 miles. And I'd go the back way and you're seeing all these lovely hills from the plateau. And I started looking at these and started realizing that actual fact, they form triangles. You know, when you look and the one comes down there, one comes behind it. And it's like, start playing with this. So it's just it evolved from that, whereby did the smoke and then I would design the image around them. And these series it's called the above below series. So the bottom part is actually just, you'd have to have a close up. It's basically flame red and then solid, and then taking a blue, just a phthalo blue, manipulating that and printing it over top, and it almost comes black, but you got this red bouncing through it. It looks very underground-ish, if you will. So I just played with these and it was just a lot of fun. So that was from 2013 to 2015. And like I was telling Samantha the other day, since that time, I didn't do a piece of artwork until last year because, you know, finishing off at Crochetto, and that was their 25th anniversary, 2017, and moving back here and getting this place organized and then building my studio last year, I finally got into making art again. So got my studio, got my press, I'm happy, especially at these times. I can hide out in there.
Out of curiosity, Samantha, kind of the same question, but what do you have coming up? I know you're doing something out here in Bend.
I am, yeah. It's my first public art project, in fact, and some of the elements of that project are behind me. And I'm also in a group show at Distracta that opens up in a couple weeks, I think. Yeah, there's some there it's strange. I don't know. It's strange. Everything feels really strange right now, you know, just coming out of the pandemic and um getting back to, I mean, I guess I've been working the entire time, but also like now interacting with other folks and trying to plan for the future. And I can tell that like sort of my, I guess my priorities have sort of shifted over the last year, you know, and like sort of some of the things that I've been concerned about as an artist, I think have um, it's things have changed, I suppose. And I think part of the appeal for me when it comes to public art projects is engaging with like a larger audience, you know, like accessibility. And that's something I want to continue to pursue because it's just I think it sort of feeds me in a way that maybe my practice hasn't in the past, you know, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to doing more of that and like working with more folks, like making images of other people and maybe not myself so much.
The last question is for Frank, but I think both could have a say in it. How do you account for the boom in printmaking today?
Wow, that's a good question. Affordability for one. You know, you look at major artists. I mean, you look at say James Lavadar. You know, you go buy one of his paintings or a series of his paintings, which you know he tiles them. I mean, you have to be well off to afford these things. But if you do some limited edition prints, much more affordable and just as spectacular, only in a different medium. And that's the other thing too. And whereas when we're talking at the end of Samantha's talk about how the prints that she did informed her next body work, Jim has said the same thing, that he looks at his paintings a little bit differently and in this business of thinking in layers and stuff like that. So I don't know, is there a boom down there? There isn't up here. But having said that, I must admit that the folks in Oregon and Washington, and I made my best sales down there. Absolutely. I mean, the support for the arts is amazing. And up here, simple as that. I don't know whether we have the population base or whatever. I don't know what it is. But still exciting to do.
Mhm.
Excellent. Well, we are at time and out of questions. So
How's that? Not bad, huh?
Perfect.
Okay. So
thank you so much for your time.
thanks, Andrew. Take care, man. Just leave.